So, hi God, it's me again. And today's topic, all I said was, and then a litany follows that, doesn't it? It's one of the things I really love about the science of mind is knowing that I can commune with, that is, truly have a conversation, a dialogue, a sharing of my thoughts with that source of being, that divine mind. So the only questions are, how often can I do that? And how much can I direct through the creative medium into completeness of mind that divine intelligence is? Like, what about all the other stuff being sent God's way? Yeah? Do I have a quota? Am I using up my future slots by too many requests? Do I forget to put the request in the proper form? Is God tired of hearing my story? Some of you will remember back a while ago I did a series on, if you want a better life, tell a better story. We had a good time with that over that period. So for those of us who practice, who actively participate in spiritual practice, including spiritual mind treatment, these questions are easily and comfortably answered in our behalf. For those of us who prefer to delay our spiritual work until or unless we're in crisis, we may be hesitant to utter those words. Hey God, it's me again. When we choose to use affirmative prayer only when we're desperate, the practice tends to take on the appearance of an act of desperation, because that's what it is at that point. And though God doesn't participate in or even recognize desperation as a quality of being, when we're in that state of separation and lack, then we certainly recognize it. Because we've accepted false evidence appearing real. That's another thing about false evidence appearing real that both of you alluded to in your Standing in the Light this morning. That often what we see as evidence is not really the truth. It's through our filter that we see it. So then once we see that and we drop into fear, then we act out of that false belief. In the science of mind, we learn that our natural, our normal state of being is health. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And you know what? That belief exists in other philosophical and theological teachings as well. We don't have the corner on the market on that, nor do we want it. In fact, quite the opposite. Because you see, it's not who you believe, it's what you believe that is your own individual power. And that's derived from communion with Divine Spirit. I mentioned to you some time ago that I was reading Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen's newest chicken soup for the soul. And it's titled A Book of Miracles. Have any of you seen this? Thick, big, Book of Miracles. The stories here are such a validation of not who you believe, but what you believe. That I find myself looking beyond the religious or philosophical background of the storyteller or the subject of the story, and listening instead to the common thread in all the stories here. And that common thread is belief. So what is a miracle anyway? I think there are more misconceptions about what a miracle is than there are right conceptions. In 900 BC, if anyone told you, all I said was, you could get from Constantinople to Carthage in 2 hours, if you had a motorized vehicle? And you'd have replied, that would take a miracle. In 900 AD, if anyone had told you, all I said was, you could get from Rome to Jerusalem in 2 hours if you flew, you'd have replied, that would really take a miracle. Now, both of those statements are not only true, but commonplace. No one calls them a miracle anymore. And yet, by definition, they still are. If you use the common definition of the word miracle as a remarkable event, they are still remarkable in that because of somebody's belief, action followed that brought forth the necessary form to do them. I'm assuming you believe that, where motorized vehicles and airplanes are concerned. Now we can even add space vehicles to that. You do believe, don't you, that someone took the action to invent an automobile and an airplane. They didn't just drop from the sky. They didn't drop in followed by a booming voice saying, look what I made today. No, they were developed and honed and continue to be, even today. So if we can believe that boats and trains and planes are the form which follows thought through our human intention and action, why would we think that physical healings or emotional healings wouldn't work the same way? It's actually easier. Why would we consider those improbable, impossible, or miraculous in the sense of the word that they contradict the laws of the universe and are a random act of God upon a favored person? Why would we believe that? Doggone if I know. Because I know so many instances where healings are as commonplace as inventions of things with wheels, wings, and motors. So I want to share one of those stories with you. This is a healing. In this particular book, there are a number of different categories. And this particular category, of which there are 10 or so stories, and these are all true stories and all certificated. I mean, there's actual proof that they happen. They're not the very creative dreams of someone. These actually unfolded. And it's a pretty thick book. So this is a section on the healing power of prayer. And this is the story of a woman named Serafina, who lived in Swaziland, which was, at the time this story was written, a small African country. And the story was told by a recently graduated college student from the United States, who was there in Swaziland trying to find herself after getting her college degree with no clue what to do next. Sound familiar to anybody? So, Kristen Torres was the girl's name. Toro was her nickname. And she went to Africa with a group, in her words, to serve AIDS patients and to hug orphans. So, this is the story that she told. She found herself walking through the mountains, and the group that she was with had to be back before dark. So, as they began to leave, she passed a very basic, even for that area, home, a hut, really. And a voice called out to the group as they walked by. So Toro walked over there and found an elderly woman sitting on a mat. The woman's name was Serafina. And through the interpreter, because, of course, Serafina didn't speak English, And Toro didn't speak much of the language of Swaziland. So the interpreter explained to her that the woman had not walked for over 2 years. And because her family was not available at the present time, she also had no clean water, and she hadn't eaten for several days. She couldn't walk to get the water or the food. So as Toro looked at her, she noticed that the woman also had a very heavy growth of cataracts, such that you could see them in her eyes. So her vision also was very poor. So Toro said, immediately the thought is in her head, Lord, tell me what to do. How can I support this? So when she asked the lady, all the lady said was, pray for me. Pray for me. No specific request, just pray for me. And Toro said the next thought that went through her mind was, I need to get on my knees to do this. Now, as you know, we don't spend a lot of time on our knees unless it's in the garden. That's a choice. In this instance, that's what called to her. And then in another moment, the thought went through her mind, reach out your hand, just stretch out your hand. So she did. And Serafina took her hand in both of her hands, so that as Toro spoke the prayer, there was a touching. Now that's something else we don't do in Science of Mind. We don't do laying on of hands because we don't feel the necessity to do that the bond between us is so complete that we are all one in God. It isn't necessary, but as you know, in other persuasions, that is sometimes a practice. And there's nothing wrong with it. If it's comfortable, there's nothing wrong with it. So she did that. And she said she began to do this prayer work and worked with Serafina over several days. And realized that in addition to all of her other issues, there was some dementia that was beginning to unfold. So she said she saw her several times over the next actual couple of months. And that whenever she could, she brought her some basic food in the African community called pap that she knew the woman's digestive system could handle. And she said one of the biggest frustrations for her was not knowing Serafina's spiritual beliefs, because of course this is in the back country of a nation that was not familiar to Toro. But she said she noticed that Serafina wore several black bracelets on her arms. And when she questioned her through the interpreter, Serafina explained that this represented the witch doctor. This was a connection for her with the witch doctor that served their little community. So one day Toro said to her, you know, I want you to know there's another way to be healed, and that way is that God has the power to heal you and to help you walk again. And the conversation went on from there, but she noticed that Serafina didn't remove the black bracelets. In fact, she noticed that not only did she have them on her arms, she also had them on her ankles. So she said, said to herself, this is how it is, and I continue to be strong in my faith and the belief that healing comes through this. But she said she did notice a few days later when she went to visit Serafina that the black bracelets were gone. And she was sitting out on her mat, close to the road this time rather than back by the hut, sitting out on the road. And she said to Toro when Toro arrived, "Where have you been? I've been waiting for you for days. And he told me you were coming. So through the interpreter, Seraphina said to her, I didn't tell you I was coming today. Who told you that we were coming? Because here she is out by the road. Did one of the children in the area tell you? Because the children sometimes run out ahead, to see what's going on. And Seraphina shook her head no and said, he told me in my heart. He told me in my heart. Toro said she knew then that something unusual was unfolding here. That, first of all, Seraphina was very different that day. First of all, she was lucid through the entire visit, no sign of dementia. She also recalled previous conversations that they had had. And although that had sometimes happened in the past, not usually. And then she also commented, and this is all still through the interpreter, also commented that she remembered the conversations they had had about the healing power of God. And she remembered that Toro had said to her, and that God has the power to forgive as well as heal. So all of this now was coming from Seraphina to Toro rather than the reverse. So the next words out of Seraphina's mouth were, but when am I going to walk again? And that was kind of a stopper for Toro. She really didn't know what to say at that point. So in the silence and watching Seraphina, she said Seraphina stood up. And then she walked. Because of the years that she had spent crawling, her legs were weak. And so she didn't get very far before she needed some support. But with some support, she was still able to walk. And by the time Toro left Swaziland, several weeks later, Seraphina's legs had strengthened through walking and walking more, and with assistance, walking still more. And Toro said the last time she saw her walk, it was in front of 500 people, that she was strong enough that she was able to stand and be with other people. So Toro's closing words about this were, whenever I think of that summer, I think of Seraphina. I think of how God did the impossible and healed an old woman with broken legs simply because she believed he would and did. So you can tell that this story was told by someone practicing a pretty fundamental faith. So what? The important thing is that the healing takes place because of the belief. And the belief is that there is, whether you call it God, whether you call it He, whatever, that there is this universal energy that's everywhere equally present. And that the power of belief is stronger than any infirmity. And I guess that's, at least for me, that's the message of that story and so many other stories in the book. That the belief is stronger than the infirmity. And when that happens, that's what we now call critical mass. When we get beyond 50%, we're moving toward critical mass. Holmes talked about that back in the 1920s and 30s. And he talked about it being when your belief is more than 51% go, yes, it works, it's true, I accept, you're there. That was before they had identified critical mass in the scientific world. So, truth is truth, wherever you find it, and it works wherever you practice it. So, when I say, "Hi God, it's me again," it doesn't matter what language I say it in, how long it's been since I said it, or even what my issue is. The only thing that matters is my intention. It doesn't matter whether I do the affirmative prayer myself, whether I talk with a prayer partner, or I invoke the services of a spiritual practitioner. The only thing that matters is my belief. My belief that miracles are simply remarkable events, and they happen all the time. My belief that I am as worthy as anybody to have vibrant, good, emotional, and physical health, abundant prosperity, and loving relationships. And here are some answers to the questions that I posed at the beginning of the talk. How often can I communicate with God? The answer is we're always in communication with God, with communion. Every thought is a part of that universal flow. How much can I direct through the creative medium into the completeness of mind that divine intelligence is? And the answer is it's all going there already. It's all going there already. It's not about how much, it's about the quality of that which serves us best. What about all the other stuff being sent God's way? Does mine get heard? Do I have a quota? And the answer is, remember that this divine intelligence is an energy. It's a life force. It's not a guy at a desk piled high with papers and projects and telephone messages and computers stressed with deadlines and regulations. It's unlimited in its capabilities. When we step into that knowing, then we are too. And then the fourth question, what happens if I forget to put the request in proper form? I think the story probably already answers this question, but what happens depends on you. Our format for spiritual mind treatment is to help us all remember to stay on task and to support each other in doing that. Does God care about the format? Of course not. We care. We care that we're clear for ourselves, and that's why we have a blueprint, a pathway to help us succeed. And the last question was, is God tired of hearing my story? Well, the short answer to that is no. But if you've ever wondered about that for yourself or for anybody else, stay tuned next week for the next talk in this series, which is titled On the Way, or In the Way. And so it is.
So it is. Thank you for your sense of humor.
You're welcome.
Are these